My name's Elliot Arthur-Worsop. I'm founder at an environmental sustainability football organisation called Football for Future. And I'm going to be your panel host for tonight with these great guys speaking about a really important topic. We're going to be speaking about climate change and sustainability in football. Climate change is going to be the defining issue of our generation, and as it sort of emerges into new political, socio-economic and cultural spaces and becomes a really important consideration in all decisions that we make. So too, football is exploding all around the world and also entering new social, political, cultural and economic spaces. So it's going to be really interesting, and there's an amazing way that these two phenomena are sort of coming together, and I think we're going to be touching on a lot of that today. If we think about how climate change impacts football, we don't have to look to the future. I mean, look, we've got two major tournaments this year that have already been moved and disrupted because of climate change, because of extreme temperatures and weather events. We had AFCON 2021 take place in January 2022 because Cameroonian meteorologists or climate scientists said that it was too hot and that the playing conditions for players would be dangerous and spectators alike. And interestingly, AFCON 2023 has already been moved forward to 2024, and that's taken place in, does anyone know where
Ivory Coast.
Ivory Coast, right, because of extreme rainfall that's predicted. But also at the moment, we've got the World Cup, and that's been moved, as we all know, it's meant to be taking place, well, it is taking place in the Middle East, and that's also been moved due to the extreme temperatures that would be taking place when the normal World Cup happens in June and July. But football isn't just an innocent victim, it also has a really interesting environmental impact. If we think about a match day experience, I think it's a very relatable prism for us all to go on this journey with, right? So you wake up in the morning, you put on your football shirt, what's that made out of? It can be made out of many different things. We travel to the stadium, how are we getting there? What travel options are available to us? About 60 to 80% of the football industry's carbon emissions come from travel. You get to the stadium, you enter, is it a paper ticket, is it an electronic ticket? Same goes for the program. What energy is being used to power the lights? Are they LED bulbs? It's a Tuesday night game maybe. The players come out, what brand is on their shirt? Is it a fossil fuel company? What boots are they wearing? At half time, maybe you want to get a pies, are there vegetarian options? What glass does your pint come in when you go to celebrate the fact that Brighton and Hove Albion have won another Premier League title? And all these things add up, right? So the global football industry has this carbon footprint greater than that of Denmark, which is, an industrialized country. So it's a really, really interesting interrelationship. But we're going to be speaking about the positives today. We're going to be speaking about the potential for football to be a climate solution. And we're really excited to have this brilliant panel. So we've got, to my right, we've got Jake, who's the founder of Sokito. We have Adrian, who plays in defence for Burton Albion. And we have Will, who's also a defender at Watford. And Will, you also play internationally for Nigeria. And Adrian, you're at Jamaica, right? Cool. Without further ado, I think we should let the panelists introduce themselves, and let's start down this end now. Will, can you just give us a little bit of an insight into how this season's gone for you so far, and then maybe a little bit of an insight into your relationship with the environment or sustainability?
Yeah. So hello everyone. I'm William Ekong. I'm 29. I play for Watford and Nigeria. This is my start of my third season at Watford Football Club, so it's been a journey up and down. I arrived in 2020 when we were in the Championship during the COVID lockdown period, so strange time anyway for everyone. We ended up getting promoted that year, played in the Premier League last season, and then we got relegated, so now we're back in the Championship trying to get back to the big league. I've been playing football as long as I can remember. Now I'm at 29, I've got 2 kids, 4 and 2, and it's kind of changed my perspective on life in general, and of course climate change, sustainability, recycling, all these things are topics that weren't necessarily things that were as important to me when I was younger, or I didn't think about as much. They have become in the last years, definitely. And I had a great opportunity to get introduced to Jake at Sokito and the brand and everything that they had planned and their fresh approach and idea of marrying those two things together, which was very interesting for me. And I'm very excited to be part of Sokito now. I've been an investor now and also become a brand ambassador. This is another way for me to practice as I preach, really, and especially in my bubble world that Adrian shares as well in the football world, where sustainability and general climate awareness isn't something which is touched on a lot, is a whole new ball game. Excuse the pun, and something that has become, it should become forefront of everything that we do, especially now in the time we've got the World Cup going on and we see how the whole world is focused on football and how it brings everyone together and gets everybody talking about all sorts of topics. And we can see, like you mentioned, the changes in football anyway in recent years of when tournaments are played and where they're played. AFCON as well, which I played in, which in January was not an ideal time, but was the only time we could play it, like you said, because of the conditions. So this is a great way for us to start something, and I'm hopeful that Sokito is going to be a movement bigger than just football boots, and it will be a way to impact football initially and hopefully sport, our way to contribute.
Awesome. Thanks, Will. Adrian. He told me it was Adrian earlier. It's not I'm going to keep switching it up. Yeah, can you give us a little bit of an insight into how your season's gone with Burton this season, and then also a little bit of an insight into your relationship with climate and sustainability?
Adrian Mariappa, currently at Burton FC. I'm 36 years old, a few years older than Will. So I'm very fortunate to still be playing football at this age. A lot of players, retire by the time they're mid-30s. I've been fortunate. I have quite a long career. I've played at a few good clubs in my time, Watford being one of them. I was in Australia last season, which was a good experience as well. But my focus has always been to try and play as long as I can, and I'm very fortunate to be a footballer. And one of the big things I've done when I was 30 years old, I changed to a plant-based diet because I wanted to just have longevity. And I thought that was the best way for me to go about it, to have a big overhaul of my diet and try and do things to just to improve my performance and reduce inflammation, etc. Trying to get a 1% wherever you can. And that kind of just led me down a little bit of a rabbit hole into, so obviously I went down that route specifically for performance, but once you start going down, you start getting information about the environmental aspects of the food industry and all the things that surround it as well. So since then I've been just kind of on a bit of a journey. I have 5 kids, all who are all plant-based as well, and kind of going on the journey as a family. So fast forward to now, I spoke to Jake when I was still playing in Australia, and this opportunity came to be involved with a football brand which is so unique, because as a footballer you don't really get to enter on that side of the game. You're always just on the pitch, and so it was a unique opportunity for me anyway, but it was something that really aligned with the things that I value, and just the way that I currently see the world, and what impact did I want to make and be a part of. So the opportunity is one I couldn't turn down, and I'm sitting here today as an investor and as an athlete, and really excited for the journey ahead.
Awesome, thanks Adrian. And finally over to the big man, Jake.
I feel like a letdown.
Yeah. So how's your football career been?
Never made it to international stage.
So can you tell us a little bit more about Sokito? And I got it written down here, right, on your website. It says you fuse innovative technologies with sustainably sourced components to create the optimum performance boot. It sounds simple, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, sure. So I suppose I kind of came into the space really because I love football, but I've got nowhere near enough talent as you two guys. And I'm really passionate about sustainability, even though I've probably not got as much knowledge as yourself. And essentially I was on holiday and I was in Vietnam, and there was overnight tailor shops and they were making brogues. And I went in there and I thought, right, I'm going to get myself a pair of football boots. And I was really interested in how they were kind of offering this like tailored service overnight. So I went to the factories, and the factories operated by essentially buying up all of the scrap material from, you know, your big brands, and they'd sit there and they'd hand cut every little last piece, and there was no wastage at all, and it was amazing. And for about a year, I was trying to make myself a pair of football boots. That was like my whole mission. And then from that, like I took a few trips back and was back at the factory, and something just clicked, and I was like, what would happen to that material if these little like shops didn't turn it into shoes and football boots and sports shoes? Like it would just be chucked away. So I did some research, started looking into it, and it turns out that 12.5 million pairs of boots get to landfill every year, just in Europe and the US, which is like horrible to think about, because they take 1,000 years to decompose, and it just stacks up and stacks up and stacks up. And essentially what it means is the football boot industry is contributing to the fact that future generations might not be able to play football because certain pitches won't be available, and it's just not right. Like football is such a platform and such a power for good that we should be using it for good, and it shouldn't affect the bad. So we're trying to do that with the boots. We're the first company that can recycle boots, and that's our mission, trying to lower the environmental impact of the football boot, initially the football boot industry, hopefully the sports industry.
Cool, that's really interesting. So you just spilled the beans on Sokito's long-term strategy. That's super inspiring and amazing. That, I mean, these awesome boots and this simple product has brought us all here today talking about such an important theme. Adrian, you touched on it just now. So you're plant-based. How many years have you been plant-based for?
So nearly 6 years now. Just over 5.
Just over 5.5 years. So could you, I guess, go into a little bit more about that journey and how it started for you as being a professional athlete, where performance is everything, right? And I guess how that's been received by your teammates in the dressing room.
Yeah.
I guess it must have been a talking point at that stage.
Yeah, you can say that. So my missus was she was vegetarian since I met her anyway, and she was always trying to get me to drop the meat anyway. She hated it in the house and stuff, but being an athlete, you're always told, you need your protein, you need meat, etc. Never thought I would ever stop eating meat. But then I had a intolerance test when I was at Crystal Palace. I think I was about 27 years old. Found out I was intolerant to eggs and dairy, two of like staples in my diet at the time. I remember I had like really bad tendonitis in my knees, and because I'm a short centre back of your height, forever needing to jump, I thought, this is getting quite bad. I think if I can't keep jumping, I'm gonna have to knock on the air at some point. So I thought, let me just, they advised to lower my eggs and dairy because I was, highly intolerant to it. So I just cut it out, just straight away, just cut it out. And then within a few months, I just noticed it just was clearing up. And before I knew it, it was gone. And I was doing like a 45-minute routine before training every day to try and get right to go and train. And I don't do that routine anymore. So, that just kind of led me on the journey to be more open-minded to changing certain things in my diet. And then fast forward a few years, I just decided just to give, just try and cut the meat out as well. Like I said, my missus never wanted me to eat anyway, so I thought, let me give it a go, see how I feel. I told the club, who didn't receive it well at all. The nutritionist said,
was this at Palace?
This was at Watford.
This
I was back in Watford, yeah, and the nutritionist said no athlete should ever be vegan, and at that point then becomes a bit of an ego thing. You're thinking, all right, okay, I'm just going to do this now just to annoy you, piss you off. But then, yeah, we had regular blood tests, and all my levels were always at a good range. Never changed. My weight never changed. My muscle mass, my performance never dipped. And yeah, I felt good. So it just became a thing, thinking, I was worried all them years about, changing certain things. You come to realise that a lot of things are, forced upon you and told certain things just may not be true, so until you give it a go. So like I said, 5.5 years on, still applying the diet. I think it's more accepted in football now. I've got a lot of stick for it at the time, but when the vegan meals are coming in training, people are always willing to try it and stuff. So it's been a good journey. Still on the journey now. Still trying to improve it, and but I think even with that industry, whereas trying to find a protein powder at the time was impossible. It was impossible. I think I was importing one because we have to have has to be labelled by Informed Sport, which means it's screened, so there's no contamination or anything in it. So trying to find it was impossible. But now the market's pretty saturated now with all sorts of ones. So now just trying to sift through the actual good ones instead of just having anything.
Yeah, and you said at Watford at the time the nutritionists weren't having it.
Yeah.
And when you went to Burton, did you find that they already had that infrastructure there to support and accommodate for your lifestyle?
I think just because of how quickly, like I said, that I feel the industry's moved, especially with food. The chefs there just didn't even bat an eyelid. They just said, okay, that's fine. But it's not to the level of when I was at Watford. Obviously, it's a Premier League club, so they've got bigger resources. They can take more time in, really dialing down on all the minute details and stuff. So, but now it's just it's on me to do that, to make sure that it is right.
Awesome.
The funny thing about it now is that we get fed vegan meals, so
really, well, that's his legacy.
They try to encourage everyone to eat vegan. So
oh wow,
I do that.
Yeah.
That's insane. And you were talking about the longevity of your career as well. In your late 30s now, but still playing and performing well. Would you attribute some of that to your diet that you were having?
Yeah, certainly. Like I said, cutting out the tendonitis in my knees. When I started getting it when I was about 25, and when I went to Crystal Palace, like I said, I was 27. I literally had to do this routine every morning before training. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to train. And, so to go nearly 10 years on and I'm not doing that anymore, I don't have to do it anymore, is at the time I never thought I would have had to. I thought I'd just been doing that forever.
Awesome.
And so yeah, for me that's one of the big things I have changed.
Yeah.
And I think just the proof's in the pudding.
Super cool. Now, Will, you helped me out earlier when I got my AFCON stat wrong, so thank you for that. But I want to touch on that. So, we're seeing, and I think it's interesting that you've got lived experience of it, the different ways that climate change through extreme weather events has a real life impact on football, whether it's for spectators, fans, volunteers. Can you describe any of the instances where your game, where your career has been affected by that? So maybe touching on AFCON, or even this summer, we had record temperatures hitting 40 degrees, 41 degrees. Were you playing in that at all?
Yeah, I think obviously everybody knows Africa in general is hot, so the baseline is different than here. But yeah, it's very different because obviously when you have a tournament where you have 2 p.m. kickoffs or sometimes 3 p.m. kickoffs, it becomes unbearable. And for a lot of the players who tend to play football in Europe anyway, playing in those kind of conditions is very difficult. So that is. I don't think I've played my football in Africa long enough, because I've only played 7 years with the national team to really maybe see the long-term changes or see the real difference. But even in that short space, like you said, seeing tournaments being changed or kick-off times being delayed, it's the immediate impact, and I think we'll get to a phase where it probably becomes impossible to play at certain times, at any time of the year. And not only that, I think the conditions of the pitches, all those things that we have to take into account, it becomes very difficult to play in sub-Saharan Africa anyway. So yeah, we have times where we have to play games in North Africa just so we can use the pitches in Morocco or Tunisia or Egypt because the pitches aren't good enough to play. So which is crazy to think when you talk about world football and teams that go on to play the World Cup and compete at that level. So I think those are the biggest changes I've seen, and of course, the summer here, everyone experienced how hot that was. That probably changed our training times as well to being early in the morning, which probably would have been, not unheard of years ago. So, within my lifetime as a football player, which is only a very short career, we can already experience those changes, and let alone to think what our children or future generations will have to play in or endure. So like Jake touched on, I think football is too much of a global game, and a great opportunity just for people to express themselves, not even talking about professional capacity, just to enjoy themselves, and sport in general, for us to not take this issue serious, because like you said, it's not going to be possible like we see in Qatar now with air-conditioned stadiums and stuff like that, for everyone to be able to enjoy sport. So I think that's a very important issue.
Yeah, definitely. I think you touched on a really interesting point there about, a player's career is relatively short, and the changes that we see in that, given how long change processes often happen to the earth, which take millions of years or tens of millions of years, maybe hundreds of thousands, if we're looking at the shortest spans of it, seeing change happen in over 10 or 15 years is just mind-bogglingly incredible. And even I know in the Prem now they started bringing in drinks breaks and stuff, or is that just in the summer?
I think that's probably has been, as and when needed, probably has had to be done, even maybe 10 years ago.
Okay.
That's probably able to talk about that. But it's just something that becomes very much more frequent, so to speak. So I can only talk about my experience, but it's something that's become very normal now, which when I was a lot younger playing, or when I was watching football on TV, that wasn't something that you used to see a lot.
Absolutely, thank you so much, mate. Now to talk about an example from a club level, I'm sure mentioning the words club and sustainability in the same sentence, you will know that I'm about to mention Forest Green Rovers, which everyone always talks about. I feel like sometimes we should move the conversation past that, but they're certified by the United Nations and FIFA as carbon neutral, the first professional club to get that certification. Just opening this one up to all three of you, what your opinions of that are, and do you think that's the future of the game?
Yeah, I do think it's the future of the game, very simply. And I think what they've done so well is they've kind of introduced changes throughout the whole club, from transport as early as bringing in electric points to the stadium, the refill points they have, everything that they do, the kits being made from coffee. I think it shows that it can be done, and it shows that we shouldn't be afraid to do it, because Forest Green are the smallest club in the league, in Football League, even down to League 2, and they're tiny. They're in a field, but they've made these changes and they've now got promoted to the stage of League 1, which is amazing. And like we were talking about earlier, I think performance has to come first. If they were relegated a couple of times, then people would start doubting these changes. But because they've tied it in with performance, it's amazing what they're doing, I think. And people are on board with it, right? Like the food, they only serve vegan food in the stadiums to the players, and no one bats an eyelid at all. So it just proves that it can be done, it can be used as a platform to spread messages, which is what football is all about, I think. It's such a power, these guys using their platform, clubs using the ability to reach hundreds of thousands, millions of people, doing it to promote good messaging and help essentially save the world. What better way to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Forest Green Rovers is a really interesting case study. Do you guys know much about what they're doing there and have an opinion?
Well, we're in a relegation fight.
Enough said.
But no, they're a club I've followed for a while. I think it was when they mentioned the new stadium that they wanted to build, it's totally made out of wooden stadium, I think, first. So I think that was the first thing that caught my eye, and then just started doing a little digging about them, and just love what the club's about. And like Jake said, they've had a real good rise. And I think the owner obviously is very, very passionate. He's obviously already in that space, and just pushing the club in the direction that he has the vision for. And I just think all it takes is that. I think someone with the vision, willing to back it, and it's proven that it can be successful. So fair play to him, more power to him, but obviously how do we beat them? It's survival, exactly.
100%. And Jake, you touched on an interesting point. Football has this amazing capacity, right? It's driven so many really important conversations around racial justice. We saw bad conversations been happening for a long time, going back into the 20th century in English football, but more recently it's sort of manifested with the BLM protests, and it's become very visual. Gender equity, that conversation, especially with the Euros in this country this summer, it's come on leaps and bounds. LGBTQ plus conversations, players in professional men's football especially coming out. It's been really interesting to see. Marcus Rashford talking about food poverty. Why do we think the climate conversation's taken so long? And do we think that football has, what do you think football's potential is to unlock that conversation worldwide? I guess, Will, can we start with you there?
I think maybe the difficult part of that conversation for clubs is that because football is so unsustainable at the moment, and everything that is done at football clubs probably undermines that message. It is quite a difficult one maybe for them to support so openly, but I think it will be a case of players maybe and young owners, for example, that we've seen at Forest Green, or people that are passionate to lead the way. So I think there is definitely probably say it was miles off it at the moment, but there's so much potential, like you said, because football I think is something that touches so many people's lives, even if it's just from following results to reading about it in the news, to actually going to the stadium or children play. It's a great way to really spread that message, and across the whole world, across so many boundaries, maybe even language barriers. So it's a great way to do it, but it's strange to see, like you said, that it hasn't really been touched on before. So I think Sokito is a great initiative, but hopefully besides this and us in this room, there'll be loads of other things in the near future that will be driven especially by players, which I think have a lot of power, professional players within that space, to make those changes. And I think it will be a snowball effect, and it has to start somewhere. I think this is a great time.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the most important thing is everything has to coincide with performance. Like I was touching on with Forest Green, that they've done really, really well. But even from a player side, I was talking to Hector Bellerin and his team, and he's obviously like a big advocate for climate and sustainability, and he gets so much stick for coming out and talking. And so that's why I think you two guys, everyone else that we've got involved, is amazing that you're willing to use your platform to talk about something. Because I think from a player's perspective, like, it must feel so easy to get shot down if things aren't going well on the pitch. And the conversations I was having was with Hector, for example. It's like, so he goes home after training, you finish training, 2 o'clock, whatever, whenever you finish, you go home. If 90% of the teammates sit on Xbox talking about climate or designing clothes, like, people see that as, oh, he's not focusing on his football. So it's such a weird kind of like complex to get your head around, that like footballers are not just footballers, like we've got lives as well. And I think the fact that you're willing to speak about it is just amazing.
No, I think the media plays a massive role in everything you just said there. Talked about some of the issues and the campaigns that have been happening in football. Around different human rights, etc. But I think with football, the media changed the perception on climate change. It's something that it affects everyone. It affects everyone, but there's always that stigma about it, and people always have a laugh about it and stuff. And I think it's just because there's obviously so many big corporations who will stand to lose a lot of money is what it is. So people almost have an invested interest in creating the perception which exists at the moment surrounding it. Obviously, when you talked about the BLM movement, etc. in football, I think people won't go against those kind of movements because we feel like as a society we want equality throughout society. So those issues I don't think have those problems, and well, not those problems, but I just think the media, they know what they're doing, and like I said, I just think because there's so much money involved in the perception that exists at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And if the guy I'm replacing, David Greedo, was here from Sky Sports, I think you'd have an interesting answer to that one as well. But yeah,
what's your thoughts on that point?
But my thoughts on that point, it's really interesting, right? I think you look at where across media organisations, truth is spoken to power with regards to communicating the reality of the climate crisis, and that happens mostly in independent media. If you think about the airtime that legacy media organisations and newspapers that are across all of the main shops and whatnot, think about the amount of airtime that the climate crisis gets. It's almost non-existent. It's as if the crisis doesn't exist. And is that by coincidence or is that by design? I think powerful interests lie where silence is, right? Wherever this might be in whatever matter or topic that might be, where there's silence, usually there's vested interests in that silence. So look around the silence. So I completely agree. You look at who owns media organisations. You've got the Murdoch Empire, for example, and at that sort of level of ultimate sort of human politics and capital, everything's sort of intertwined with different industries that are reliant on and are propped up by fossil fuels. So you can sort of understand there's a bit of a rationale, and maybe we're reading into it, but I think there's a conversation that needs to be had there, because the media plays a massive part, and the crisis won't be solved unless they're speaking about it, to be perfectly honest. But on a more positive note, that's just my thoughts. So we're talking about all of these different sustainable initiatives in football, and across all these different stakeholder levels, whether you're a player, whether you're Forest Green Rovers or a non-league club, whether you're a broadcaster or a media organisation, whether you're a burger van man or a football boot designer. There's all these amazing initiatives, and today we've spoken about Forest Green Rovers and we've spoken about boots, but I was wondering if there are any other cool initiatives that are happening in football that you guys might like to give a bit of a shout out to.
I don't know what's happening at club level, if anything, but I think that's where there's so much scope for improvement, and immediate scope for improvement. It would not be difficult to put in refillable water points in clubs and training grounds. And off the top of my head, I can't think of any huge examples, but it's just the small things, I think. And if you take all of the small things across, even the league clubs, but even further down, semi-pro teams, amateur teams, of just car sharing, or if it's really close, just cycle. And that's the main ones, and making sure you recycle or just have a reusable bottle. It's all the small things, but football's so vast that those small things added together really create a huge impact.
Absolutely. Are you aware of any sustainable initiatives in football that you feel that kind of sounds interesting?
For me, there's not any big ones. I think that is the interesting part about all of it. Is that sustainability, like I said, in football is something that isn't really touched upon at all. So unless we're talking about using refillable bottles instead of another Lucozade bottle, but that is something that is probably more down to the club's financial interest, not spending on those things than necessarily thinking about sustainability. So in that sense, there is actually no great initiative that I'm aware of, maybe Adrian is, but in football that I could think of. So something like Sokito, when this came about, this was like something I wanted to latch on straight away, and within the change room, just by wearing the boots has become a talking point with players that I know, and everyone seems to see this as a great initiative, but there is such big scope and endless possibilities that definitely should be explored. And I think it's all of our responsibilities as players, current players, to make those things general conversation, and I think we have the power as well with the boys that we have, and maybe the financial capability as well, by playing football, to actually try and touch on those things in partnership with different brands or different organisations who are already much further, and just it doesn't have to be anything rocket science, but just using things that are already very applicable to different sectors or sports and bringing it to football. So I think there's so much that can be done, but it hasn't been done at all.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, right? You know, if there aren't like those like sort of go-to examples of initiatives that have caught our imaginations and inspired us, then there's like, I mean, it's a shame that that's not already happening and we're further behind than where we need to be, given, you know, the timeframes that we need to operate on. But it's also exciting of the grounds and opportunities that lie ahead, right? There's so much room for creativity and innovation, and for people to really become champions and you know, ambassadors for these issues in new ways. It's completely new ground, which I think is really exciting. And you touched on it there, Will, talking about the power and responsibilities that athletes have. So I guess before I go into talking about the future of sort of the climate conversation with athletes, you know, it's a form of athlete activism, I guess we'd all agree, right? Athletes speaking about an issue, and however you try to drive change, which is what you guys are doing by becoming ambassadors for Sokito, essentially, right? Trying to drive change in one way or another, and it could be through raising awareness or changing attitudes, or it could be through investing into sustainable initiatives. Do you guys have any examples of like the most inspiring like athlete activism that have meant the most to you? And it doesn't have to be in climate, it just might be like another athlete who's done something and you thought, wow, that's really cool, like this inspired you to sort of stick your neck out and do the work that you're doing.
I mean, like through time, there's been loads of examples of people really putting their careers on the line for different, you know, various different things to do with activism. I think, you know, Muhammad Ali probably's got the biggest one. You know, he's ended up in jail for refusing to go to war. So, you know, I think over, you know, the course of time, there's been so many good examples. But I just think it's about, you know, just, you know, setting an example, just going, you know, and just doing what you can do. That might just trigger the next person, you know. So, because I think a lot of people will, you know, be on board with doing certain things, but sometimes they just don't know how to. And I think that's maybe how the football industry is a little bit. So, at times maybe a little bit late to catch on, but I think as soon as someone starts saying, you know what, you know, you can do it this way, this will be better. It only takes, you know, one club to follow another, and then before you know it, everyone's following each other, and you know, you're moving in the right direction.
Definitely, completely agree. Will or Jake, do you want to share just one like super inspiring example of an athlete who's been using their platform for good?
I think the other first person that comes to mind is probably Colin Kaepernick, I think is his name. It's obviously in the States where he refused to play, and then he obviously got completely left out by the NFL, and he did what he stood for, and I think that was probably the start of the Black Lives Matter movement in stateside in sport, and then came over here as well, and something that I actively took part in as well, and a lot of players did, and became such a talking point. So, but yeah, that probably cost his career, but that was something that he was very passionate and stood for. So, yeah, something like that has to be applauded and very much respected. And yeah, I think if it comes down to it, you have to ask yourself a question as an athlete: would you do the same for something that you stand for? And obviously on that scale, and being the superstar that he is, yeah, I thought Maps is very good. I think I'm quite good, but I don't think we're at that level. But I mean, sometimes it just starts with, like you said, being in the change room with some players, and yeah, you get the chance to share the pitch with some superstars throughout the season or throughout your career, playing against people, sometimes with people, and yeah, you never know what kind of impact you might have on them, and eventually what kind of platform they might use it on. And that's not to try and brush off to someone else, but just more put in a realistic perspective of what we can do. And for me, this is much more than just about my playing time and what I can do right now, but also, yeah, the future and thinking about my kids and the future of football, and even what kind of role I want to have in football past the playing time. And I think, yeah, it will be such a wasted experience that I've had for all these years in my active career, not to do something with that afterwards, just to share that with the next generation. And yeah, and I think Sokito is now my starting point, but in general it will be something that I would want to use, if it's with Sokito, with other brands, other initiatives, or other platforms, to hopefully use it as a movement beyond my playing career anyway.
Awesome, super inspiring. Well, and I think it's interesting talking about the Cape and example as well, because I think that's one of the first instances that we've had where a brand has really come out and support their athlete on that mission. You know, maybe he was dropped by the NFL, but Nike stood by him through that campaign. They ran a lot of his campaigns for him, supported him with his communications around it, and I think that's been like a bit of a watershed moment with regards to brands supporting players in the activism space, because I think that's why a lot of players maybe weren't doing it so much in the noughties and in the 2010s, because there was so much commercial interest. You don't want to upset your brand, you don't want to upset your club, but to see solidarity from, you know, these cornerstones of your careers. Brands are huge for you guys, right? They're so significant. I think it's really interesting, and I think we're going to see, you know, once again, Sokito as a brand coming in here, supporting their athletes to join a conversation like this. I think we're at the start of something really interesting. And Jake, I guess I'd like to ask you what you think the future of athletes championing the climate conversation looks like.
I think it is the future, to be honest. I think it has a power. I'm going to paraphrase from Morton Torsby, who's a contact of ours. But football is like the largest global phenomenon. It's bigger than like any religion, any nation. It's enormous. Like the amount of people that play football, that love football, that follow footballers, clubs. So it has a power to create change. You spoke about some of the movements that have been generated through football, and this feels like now is the time. People are starting to speak about the climate crisis. The work that you guys are doing at Football for Future, for example, Planet League, Pledge Board, there's tons of organisations coming into the space because I think the urgency has been realised. And I think the more players we get, Adrian's more wills that we get talking about it, then others will talk about it. You talk about it in the changing room when you go in and it starts a conversation. We're lucky with football boots, right, that you go into a changing room and 24 other guys are also putting on the same thing. Everyone needs it. So that is a great conversation starter. And I think we're at that stage, we need to just start a conversation. We're not coming in and saying, we are the brand that's gonna fix the world, because we're not, and there's room for improvement for us, for everyone. But what we can do is start a conversation and make these small changes, and then that will create the movement. And then that's when the big corporations will have no other choice, because the social movement will have already been created through football, which sounds pretty nice, doesn't it?
Sounds good to me. And I mean, obviously contextualizing it where we are, speaking at Better. Climate and sustainability, are also linked to mental health, especially from the perspective of climate anxiety. A lot of people get very worried and anxious about these topics that are huge and can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming. Are those anxieties, did you guys experience them, and does that drive you to do what you're doing here today?
I personally can't say I do experience those anxieties. I just feel like it's the right thing to do, and like I said, to try and if we can help change the narrative, we can get the conversation started, show that there's another way to do it. I think that's creating real impacts of change.
So, and what yourself?
I think I probably agree with Adrian there. I think it's not something for me personally that it gives me anxiety to that point. Of course, it's something that I do think about a lot. My wife, on the other hand, she's someone that speaks about it a lot, and I think she probably does feel that much more. I think, just from a selfish point, having children has also changed that perspective for me, and made me think beyond myself. And then I think that's something that definitely is a conversation in my household. But I know there's a lot of people that do feel anxiety, and definitely it's something that is, like you said, it's ties in with Better FC and Better in general. But I think the whole stigma behind it, and something that we're all going to have to deal with. And probably as this becomes more of an urgent matter, as it already is, but spoken about more and more people probably would feel that and probably feel that pressure and anxiety. So it's another issue to deal with, really. So
Absolutely. And yourself, Jake, you've done so much work driving change in this space. Is climate anxiety something that you've dealt with?
For me personally, no, but I think people do struggle with it, right? But then I also think, look at why we're here. Like you just mentioned, we're here for Better FC. And for me, whenever I feel anxiety or I'm down, whatever's going on, I look back to that thing right there, which is football. And it brings everything together, and you can take that out, you can go and play football anywhere around the world. And not just football, but sport. I think it's just an amazing platform to deal with anything that you have going on, and what Razak's doing with Better FC. Again, opening conversation about an issue which is really difficult to talk about, but doing it through football, because football can solve loads of problems very, very easily. It's just amazing.
Definitely, I think it's such a beautiful answer, and I want to ask you that same question. So, when you do feel anxiety, everybody does in different ways for different reasons. Some people more than others, but how do you guys deal with that? Do you have your own sort of unique ways? Is it football or something else?
For me personally, there's a few things. Exercise, definitely one. I feel like looking after your physical being helps your mental being as well. But I think a massive thing is community. And people can find that in different things, different places. But look at what Better FC has here. That's a community. So having someone who is like-minded, or can be from different cultures or whatever, but when you feel that real sense of community, you can open up to people, you can have those conversations. Someone might be going through what you've gone through, or what you are going through at the time. So I think that's a massive thing to have.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing. And yourself, Will?
I think the biggest thing for me to deal with that is exercise as well. So I think we're quite fortunate that we spend almost every day an hour and a half outside in the fresh air, on a football pitch, engaged 100% in something that we love to do, and I think that opens up your creative space in your mind, and when you're having bad days or clouded, then it's a great way to sometimes refresh that and restart. And another thing, I think talking about it is a massive thing. I think with football is something that we've spoken about as well as of late. about players and anxiety, because as much as I love football, it can also be a great cause of anxiety as well, having to perform all the time and not living up to expectations, the pressure of social media, everything else that is expected from you all the time, and being in a high pressure environment. But then on the other side, you know, when you, for me, stepping through the door at home and spending time with my kids sometimes puts everything in perspective, and yeah, it makes you realise that those pressures aren't necessarily real pressures, and yeah, then you have completely different thoughts about it. Also, I think for me, the balance of community and having people around you is number one, that you feel comfortable to share with, share experiences with, good and bad. That is a great starting point for myself, and I think I'm very lucky in that sense that I have those people around me, and yeah, the vice of exercising, yeah, it's also been a big part of my life that I don't know. Yeah, I don't know my life any other way but that way, so I couldn't say if I could use anything else but that, because that's been something that's been almost like my therapy through life anyway. So but yeah, it's definitely something that everyone needs, and in different ways. But yeah, I think the key one that Adrian, you know, touched on, I think community and having people around you, that is something that all of us need, and another way to relax that the mind and the stress of everything. Everyone has their own vice, but the community is the key one.
Awesome, thanks for sharing as well, mate. I think that brings us round full circle pretty nicely. Mental health, community, football, which is why we're all here. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. I think that sort of yeah, brings us to a really nice place. I don't know how we're doing for time, if we can open up to some questions from the audience. Yeah?
Yeah, no, it's me, so.
All right, yeah, thanks. Yeah, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask the guys?
First off, this man first, come off to you. Can I ask, revisiting, I guess, what clubs can do to tackle climate change, and particularly, I guess, around transport, which, you know, more than 2/3 of emissions come from transport. 2/3 of that is road, obviously airports and something. What are clubs doing at the moment with that? I mean, I still want to see Liverpool smashing Barcelona at Anfield, but obviously there's massive sort of carbon footprint from the sort of transport of going to play at the clubs. What's been done already, or is there more that clubs can do now? That's kind of an easy win in terms of rewilding projects, carbon offsetting, etc.
I'll be honest with you, I don't actually know like what's actually being done. I don't know how they would change it, because I just think, you know, obviously they have to get to games, you have to get to fixtures, etc. So I'm not qualified enough to make a properly informed comment on that. But you know, yeah,
I think an important thing is like the governing bodies that organise these games, because we all want to see World Cups, right? But it's just like being sensible with it, and it's similar to when we balanced performance, the planet, and profit. And forgotten the third P. And at the moment, big decisions are just being driven by profit. So UEFA are changing the Champions League format, so there's more teams, so there's more travelling, there's more emissions. The World Cup, the next World Cup, there's more teams. And it's all because TV revenue brings in extra cash for extra players, and sponsorship rights, everything is driven by cash. And if there's just an imbalance, once we bring in the two other P's, if I remember them, then everything kind of like flattens out, because let's be honest, like football will always have an impact, but it's just about lowering it to a level that is manageable, I think.
Yeah, definitely. If I can jump in there as well. So at Football for Future we do different things, but part of what we do is we do sustainability consultancy for clubs. So we've got a partnership with Wolverhampton Wanderers at the moment, and it's really interesting thinking about what a club can do. Like Jake said, from a sort of governance level, leagues, federations, tournaments, they can be, you know, having sustainability criteria in, you know, for clubs to participate in leagues. The Bundesliga just introduced sustainability criteria for participation, but carbon should also be a key consideration in the bidding process for the next World Cup, for example. At that level, at a club level, it depends whether you've got a lower league club with less financial capacity, or if you've got a top tier club who's owned by a billionaire or a petrostate, which is what, a trillionaire, I don't know what that is. And you can do different things. Firstly, you need to audit. You need to get an audit of everything that you do, from carbon to biodiversity to waste. And because you can't manage what you don't measure, right? You can't say we're going to reach carbon neutrality if you don't know where you're starting. So you do need to measure where you start, and then it's about educating the people that work there to embed this culture of a sense of duty across the organisation. It's not just one person's responsibility. Develop action plans, a strategy, an overarching vision, communicate what you're doing, I think that's kind of like a pretty good set of things that you can do. You can eliminate single-use plastics quite easily, and do a couple of nice little wins with Wolves. They're actually looking at working with Avanti, who are a big transport provider, which would be really interesting. We just partnered them with the local wildlife trust for the Black Country. I can't remember, but they're all doing their biodiversity audits, and they're going to get the academy involved to do nice little workshops and stuff like that. So you can take a really creative and holistic approach.
Liverpool actually got the train from Crewe down to London when they played Arsenal last season, and someone took a photo of the whole squad at Crewe football, Crewe train station, of what on earth was the Liverpool team doing there. And I just think that's a nice example of such a simple change. Just getting on the train, the tracks are there, the infrastructure's there, but it was just someone obviously higher up was we don't need to drive or fly. So I know that Man United flew to Leicester, I think, for one of their fixtures, and that comparatively is an hour and a half,
Nice.
over car. But,
To be fair, I will say that a lot of clubs I've been at have tried to use the train as much as they can. I think it will, for those bigger clubs, I think it just depends on, as long as they're not going to get mobbed at the train station and stuff, which I think it's probably more for security reasons, which is, I think, the other thing you have to balance on.
Definitely, that's a really quick point. What's your experience with that?
I think we this season really had 2 fixtures where we took the train for Watford Junction. So I think Watford try to do as much as they can, but sometimes it's also just the actual timings of we play every 3 days sometimes in the championship season, of when the train's actually going, when we need to be back at the training ground to recover for the next game. So I think there's some parts of it, the transport, which is key, which can't actually, can be changed, but it'll be harder to change just because of how the team has to prepare for a game and needs to be there on time. Think about the next game, but I think for players at Watford, I think we have 16 electric charging points now, and I think from the squad of 26 players, I think there's about 9 or 10 players that drive electric cars, which is a big change in the last years from when everyone had the big AMG 6-litre guzzlers. So I think that is a way that we can impact some part of the journey, and I'd like to think that maybe the big coaches will become electric as well sooner or later.
Sure.
And also you don't have to fly, you can take the train. I think that's it's a no-brainer. I think most of the players don't like flying anyway, so that is another point. But I think there's certain things that can be changed, but some things that's obviously very difficult, just timing wise. Yeah.
Great answers, thank you guys. Should take another question.
I've got a question for each of you, and it's really with the panel and the fact that we all have the ability to have an impact, whether that's sustainability, mental health, and races, and have the ability to inspire. So I'd love to hear from each of you, what advice would you give to your younger self about looking after your mental health?
It's a good question.
We'll start with the other ones. Whoever wants to take it first.
Give us that.
I think talking to people. I think it took me a long time to be able to open up to people, especially in football, because I think such a stigma with talking to people. You didn't really want to express any problems to managers or coaches, etc., because it could be seen as a weakness, and then the manager might not pick you. But I think times are changing now, especially. So just being more open. I think I've been fortunate where I've had good family around me, and I've always had good routines in place. I mentioned about exercise, community. I grew up, going to church. That's a good community in itself. And various different ones for different sport and stuff. So I think just being, more open-minded, not, being able to talk to people and stuff was something I would just say to my youngster.
Great advice. I would have taken that as well. I think the only other thing that I would add to that is I think the pressure of football. I think from a very young age, I think I kind of made it very do or die all the time, and I think dealing with the setbacks and the disappointment of not achieving the levels which I had in mind, which I think as a young kid you always dream of being at the very top and playing for the best teams. I think I found that quite difficult. So I wouldn't say anyone to dream less big, but I think being realistic of where you are and also just trying to enjoy the journey itself instead of just focusing on the end goal of playing in the Champions League or World Cup or God knows what anyone would want to do. So I think that would be my advice as well, because it goes very quickly for where I am now in such a short career. I think that would be the key thing is just to really take the pleasure of just playing and having the privilege of exercising, doing something you love every day, no matter what level that is at.
I think everything that I would advise has been mentioned there. Like for me, the main things are like community, surrounding yourself with good people, speaking about whatever problems you have, and listening to other people's problems as well, which comes within that community package. And finding what works, what copes for you. If your coping mechanism is exercise, if it's whatever it is, then understand it. And that's also a great one, by the way, appreciating the journey. Because I think to this day I actually struggle with that right now, because you always just you set yourself the goalpost and you hit the goalpost, but then there's another set over there, so you don't think about that one. Yeah. So I think that's
cool.
Anything new?
For me, probably just to look after my body, because mental health and physical health are obviously super interlinked. And I grew up, I love football so much, I was plagued by injuries, and I go through very long periods of not being able to do sport, and I think being able to do that would be beneficial. Look after your body. Thank you for the great question.
And also food, right? I think that makes a massive impact of what you put into your body. If I have ever been through a phase of eating McDonald's as a teenager, I feel shit. And then if you go and eat some nice fresh salads, you don't drink, you just feel like a weight has been lifted, and you don't realise that the weight's lifted until it has, and then you look back and go, fucking hell, that was not very nice a couple of weeks ago. So that would be one.
100%. So we have a question over here. Yes, please. Of course, it's okay. It's Q&A.
Yeah, so I work with sort of organisations on climate and sustainability, and I think it's quite an exciting time because we've got loads of people just coming out making all these commitments around net zero, and it's often key influences within those organisations that are the ones that can make that change happen. And I'm just interested from, how do we get the world of football to change? Who is it within the football club environment that actually needs to be influenced for them to go, actually, we're going to take this seriously? Who are those kind of key people that are going to make that bigger shift?
I think our football club, of course, you have a hierarchy of the owner, CEO, technical director, coach, players, and then non-playing staff. I think that's probably how it all goes. So I think in general, all the big decisions regarding anything that gets done at the club, the stadium, transport, probably get done by come across the desk of the owner or the CEO. So I think those people are probably the people that really can make the bigger changes. But then at the same time, I think us being in the building, we see them every day at lunchtime. We see them throughout the day. We have meetings with them about different subjects. So I mean, it also just becomes a thing of raising that awareness. I think Jake made a great point as well as you did about actually measuring what a club does. I think that would be a great starting point. And somewhat maybe also create a competitiveness within the clubs to improve that. I think Forest Green probably is the gold standard at the moment, but I think it would be great to see if one of the big clubs did it. Of course, that will create a great interaction with fans and people that also feel passionate about that. And there'll be another thing just to compete in. I think at the end of the day, football and the competitiveness is also something that people love and love to be part of. So if you could contribute as a fan to your team, having zero carbon emission or something you could do on a match day as well, because it's the facilities are there that a club owner has provided in the stadium, and you could just do that by making the right decisions or finding different ways to go to a stadium. All those kind of ways are great initiatives to get everyone involved. But I think I think informing the people at the top and also creating, you only need probably one or two clubs to get on board and openly speak about it for other clubs to follow suit, or even the movements of supporters to question why their club isn't doing the same thing. So I think that's probably the best way of doing it.
I think there has to be some kind of like legislation introduced from the FA, from the leagues, because let's be honest, like Watford may be able to, big teams that have got cash knocking around may be able to make all of these changes, but if you're a lower league side, League One, in a relegation battle, you're going to want to spend your money on bringing someone in who can help keep you in that league, rather than like putting refillable water stations in. Because if you then get relegated, like it's almost game over, right? So I think it will be really, really difficult unless there's really passionate owners or some kind of legislation introduced.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it's going to have to come from the likes of the FA or UEFA or FIFA to really implement changes within all of the clubs. I think unless the owners have a genuine interest, like Forest Green, because like I said before, I just think the narrative around climate change probably isn't at the top of most club owners' agendas at the moment. So I think for it to really change, just like what these guys have said, I think it has to come from probably the governing bodies.
I think what these guys have all touched on is just the amount of different stakeholders that have been mentioned just here in the last couple of minutes shows that everyone in football has a responsibility. Everybody who works in football, whether you're a backroom staff, whether you work for a brand, whether you work at a broadcaster, whether you're a groundskeeper, every single person that works in football has a unique position of power and a unique responsibility to drive change in the remit of what they do. And I think obviously the people who call the shots mostly at a club are the owners, right? The board of directors, that's how most clubs operate. But you could do a really interesting power analysis of a club. So that's a hard power, but then you've got different types of soft power and invisible power, and probably the voices of players are some of the most influential forces in the football ecosystem. But fans as well are super, super influential. I know the one email from a fan at Everton to the club has got Everton to start doing a whole sustainability strategy. Burnley Football Club, they have a fan group called Sustainable Clarets. They've driven a sustainability campaign at Burnley, same at Huddersfield. So fans also have a lot of power, and it's about organising, and it's about having a focused message. But every single person has power, and I think it's about organising. It's about finding other people who think the same as you. If you can't find that, then it's not on your work. It's not on your remit, because sustainability and climate considerations aren't on the role descriptions of people that work in football yet. But it's a movement, right? So it's everybody all together, I think. Any other questions? We got one more, and then one more, and do we have time for one?
Yeah, one more.
Is that okay?
So I noticed a lot of footballers listen to music before an actual game. like on the bus to the stadium, and I'm wondering what kind of songs do you guys listen to, or are you just trying to like focus on the game, or so like an inspiration behind the songs you listen to, or you want to just focus enough on the game?
I listen to so much different stuff. It just depends on what kind of mood I'm in, to be honest with you. I listen to probably like rap, reggae sometimes, house music. Just depends on how I'm feeling, where I am in the world. So yeah, I don't have a set song or playlist I go to. Just just whatever.
As long as you listen to the Thomas the Tank soundtrack earlier, you don't want to.
Yeah, I've got 5 kids, mate. That on your Spotify raps.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, for me it's probably the same. I think I like a set few songs that get me in a certain mindset, a bit of a hype. But it depends on the day. Sometimes it's just to focus and take my mind off it. It's nice to sometimes zone out and kind of also sometimes you just need the calm of what's about to happen and the way you're trying to prepare yourself for mentally as well. I think it becomes like a habit. I think all of us love music. Everyone in this room does for different reasons, and sometimes it's just a nice way to clear your thoughts and just focus in on what's about to happen. So I think that's probably my way of using music. But yeah, it just depends what playlist I click on the match day. Yeah.
Who's on the speakers in January?
I don't hear it because I get my.
Cool. I think that's a wrap.
That's
Let's
awesome.
hand over back here.
So, just a huge thank you to all 4 of you for giving us your time and that insight into everything we've talked and touched on, and everyone for coming down this evening. Thank you very much. We'd absolutely love you to stay. We've got Jordan designing a pair of boots upstairs. It's warm upstairs, so you can warm up before you go back into the cold. And we'll happily get everyone a drink on the house to enjoy. So we've got a lot of really interesting people here. And a chance just to chat with like-minded people. We've got lots of artists who have designed the boots up here, who have a very interesting story. And if they have 5-10 minutes, it'd be a chance to, if you have questions for any of the panelists, to just get to know, as I said, the individuals behind the personalities. But a huge thank you to everyone for coming down and getting involved. Support in any shape or form has been greatly appreciated. So big thank you from me. Thank you all.
Thank you.